Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On today's show, we discuss the news of Virginia Tech guard Tyrese Radford being suspended indefinitely from the team and what it means for Hokie hoops moving forward, the news of co-defensive line coach Darryl Tapp likely leaving Virginia Tech for the San Francisco 49ers and what it means for Virginia Tech's football program and recruiting, and a lot more. Episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, that's nearly 10 different ways you can consume the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you're listening or watching, we're so glad you could join us as we record on Wednesday morning, January 27th. Our crew today, to my left, our managing editor, Chris Coleman. Across the way, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. Behind the scenes, the best podcast producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. It is great to have you with us. A reminder, if you're watching live on YouTube, be sure to drop a question in the YouTube live chat, and we will get to those at the end of the show. The Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by Anytime Fitness. You know, each new member gets a free fitness consultation, and a program is designed. Now, through your first billing period, you can sign up for $1 for the first month. Call 540-951-1340. Again, that's 540-951-1340. Ask for Tyler and tell him Tech Sideline sent you. The Tech Sideline Podcast is also presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Find out how you can get involved and support Virginia Tech Wrestling, the 8th-ranked Virginia Tech Wrestling program in the country. SoutheastRTC.com. Again, that's SoutheastRTC.com to get involved with the Southeast Regional Training Center today. Gentlemen, it's great to be back with you. We typically record on Mondays, but a lot of news has come out. We shift to Wednesday. Chris, it's been a eventful week in Virginia Tech athletics, to say the week.
That's a word to use. Yeah.
The wrong kind of events.
The wrong kind of events. Yeah, it's not exactly one that you draw up. You lose to Syracuse by 18. Your best recruiter's leaving the football program. Your best basketball player's arrested. Women's basketball blew another double-digit lead. Am I missing anything?
Well, here are the positives, right? Wrestling beat UVA, which was a good win. Right. And we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. Great news from men's soccer last week. News that you just don't get that often. So we'll talk about it all on episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Again, great to have everybody with us. Evan Hughes, Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. We've got a lot to get into, so let's go ahead and jump in just a moment.
So let me jump in with a little correction. The first billing period is 2 weeks for Anytime Fitness, not a month. And I have started working out there. So since the last podcast, I've done my first 3 personal training sessions. So I've already lost 25 pounds. I'm just kidding, no.
Oh, my God.
So going into this, I weighed 186 with 29.4% body fat. We will check in at the beginning of February. And then either mid-February or early March. Usually when I'm on a weight losing thing, I'm looking at the scale fairly often. I'm not doing that this time around. I'm just doing the work, and we'll see where it goes.
I do it once a week.
Do you really?
Yeah. Well, I don't do it once a week now, but when I was trying to get down to 10%, I'd look at it once a week, every Tuesday.
So you did the whole in-body machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a reminder, the in-body machine is this high-tech thingy that they measure your They measure your weight, they measure your skeletal muscle mass, visceral fat, all kinds of stuff,
Body fat percentage. It'll even break it down, like how much does your left leg weigh, how much does your right leg weigh, all of that stuff.
Supposedly that affects your health to be like out of balance, weight and muscle wise. Yeah, and of course they key it to your phone number, so they keep a record so you can see over time weight and other things going up and down.
Yeah, you can sign up for $1 for the first billing period.
Right.
That's 540-951-1340, Anytime Fitness. So great to have them a part of the Tech Sideline family and the Tech Sideline podcast.
I'm enjoying it.
Well, we've got a lot to get into, as we just mentioned before. We're going to talk about so many different sports today. We're going to talk a lot about Virginia Tech football, especially the news about Darryl Tapp and what it means for recruiting. We'll talk about women's basketball, wrestling, and men's soccer. But we begin episode 164 of the Tech Sideline podcast talking about Virginia Tech men's basketball. Early Sunday morning, Hokies guard Tyrese Radford was arrested and has been charged with 1 misdemeanor count of first offense driving while intoxicated and 1 misdemeanor count of carrying a concealed weapon. He has been suspended indefinitely by the men's basketball program. Will, I know there's a lot to unpack here, but yes. I want to get what were your immediate thoughts when you heard about the news, and what do we know right now regarding the situation?
My immediate thoughts were, Cordell Pimsel, for example, has been out for a while, and it hasn't really hurt the team. John Ogiaco not being able to come back hasn't really hurt the team. This one's going to hurt. So my first reaction was just being really disappointed for him and the team. And there's no way you can put a happy face on this. This is a bad situation, and it's unfortunate. And what we know at this point, which was reported by Mark Berman of the Roanoke Times yesterday, is that Tyrese was pulled over, and the breathalyzer got him at 0.13%. The legal limit in Virginia, of course, is 0.08%. So interesting history that a lot of younger people don't know. When I was in high school and college, I don't know when the law changed, but I remember when I was young and first started driving, the legal limit for DUI was 0.15%. That number is really high. If you are 0.15%, you're pretty drunk. And at one point it dropped to 0.10, and that was very brief, and then down to 0.08, where it has been for many, many years. So it's kind of, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but that's the historical context for Tyrese's situation. So if you don't know much about this sort of thing, 0.13 is pretty impaired. And what they do in a DUI is they give you a breathalyzer on the spot. They do field tests. He failed the field sobriety tests, and you know the drill with that. It's walking in a toe-to-toe in a straight line, reciting your alphabet, that kind of stuff. And they will typically I think they'll do a breathalyzer right there on the spot, but the one that goes in the record is the one that they do at the police station later. So I think in his case he was pulled over roughly 115. Failed the field sobriety test. They did a breathalyzer there, which was not reported. That's really, I think, for the officer to decide, do I need to arrest and take him on in? And I believe that the 0.13 breathalyzer test was roughly 2:45 a.m. So you're talking about hour to an hour and a half between when he was pulled over and when the official breathalyzer test of record was done. So we know that about the DUI portion of it. What we don't know is we don't know any details about the concealed carry violation. And I'm getting out of my realm of expertise here. I personally am not a big gun guy. I'm not a big anti-gun guy. I'm just kind of in the middle. I know a little bit about it. So what is not public record, but what we've been told is that the gun was purchased legally. It's not like he was carrying around a gun that has no record and that had the serial number filed off or something ridiculous like that. It's not that. So the gun was purchased legally, and there are, from what I understand, and if there are any attorneys or anybody out there on the YouTube feed who can provide more detail, a concealed carry violation is if you are carrying a gun you're concealing it on your person or in your vehicle or in a backpack or something like that, and you do not have a license to do that. I have a concealed carry permit. And to do that, there are certain things you have to do. You have to apply for the license. You have to go through a gun safety course. There are things you have to do. You can't just buy a gun, which is perfectly legal, and then hide it. That's not legal. And you can put a gun on your person that is visible. That's legal. But the instant you hide it from view, that's not legal.
I see a woman in Kroger every now and then. She's got a gun
just
on
packing
her
on the
holster.
hip.
Yeah.
But it's not just that. From what I understand, if you have a legal gun and a concealed carry permit and you are intoxicated, that is a violation of your concealed carry permit. That's my understanding. We don't know anything about that part of the arrest. And so we're going to get into talking about, how long should the suspension be? What should Virginia Tech do, et cetera, et cetera. And it's complicated because it's not just a DUI and it's not just a concealed carry violation. It's both. And people view both things differently.
Your just initial thoughts when you heard Chris, where'd your mind jump to?
Well, I was in Anytime Fitness when I heard the news, and I was actually almost done with my workout, but it put me in a bad mood, so I worked out for 45 minutes longer than normal.
Oh, gosh.
And my first thought was emotional because Tyrese Radford is one of my favorite players ever at Virginia Tech.
Chris has interviewed Tyrese one-on-one.
Set closer to Tyrese than I was for me to you right now, and interviewed him for 10 or 15 minutes. Did an article. We got a good quote in there, which I'll use later. But my first thought from an emotional reaction was, well, there goes the season. That was honestly my first thought.
Yeah,
because this is our best player, first on the team in minutes. Second on the team in points, second on the team in rebounds, second on the team in assists. You don't just plug somebody in there and make up that production. Now, I've backed off my ledge since then. I don't necessarily think the season's over or anything like that, but I do think we're on a precipice, so to speak. The schedule's about to get tougher. The second half of the schedule is a lot tougher than the first half of the schedule, and you're going to have to run that gauntlet without your best player. So, Saturday morning, I was 90% convinced, 95% convinced that Virginia Tech was going to the NCAA tournament this year. And I don't know what that number is now, but it's not 90 or 95 anymore.
No, it's really not.
I would, for me personally, I would probably put it around the, 25 to 35% chance. I just think that's how much he means to the team.
We'll get into it a little bit more about what Virginia Tech does next without Tyrese Radford. Who are some players who can try and step in and fill the shoes that Tyrese is leaving behind? But Will, you brought up a question a moment ago that we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and transition. He has been suspended indefinitely by the Virginia Tech men's basketball program. You mentioned that there are some details that we don't know regarding his situation. Do you think he will suit up for Virginia Tech this year, given the information we know right now?
I think I'm just not sure. The environment for things like a DUI and carrying a gun it gets beyond just the arguments about whether or not it's a felony or misdemeanor. From what I understand, these are both misdemeanors. It gets beyond that, and it becomes a bit of a hot potato and an optics thing. And there are certain things that athletes can do to get into trouble that are more likely to be, even though legally they might be kind of similar, in the court of public opinion and perception and how a university reacts, they are treated differently. So, for example, one of the worst things an athlete can do is lay his hands on a woman in a violent manner. That does not sit at a college campus. It doesn't sit in society. But on a college campus in particular, if an athlete makes that mistake, he's not coming back. He's gone. Doesn't matter what the details are of the legal situation, which often does not become public. And certainly there are athletes that have been dismissed from Virginia Tech in the past for that particular situation. You are not coming back from that. So then you get into talking about the two different things that he's been arrested for. And so let's take the DUI. And man, we could talk about that one for a long time. And I actually am going to talk about that one for a long time. So we had, longtime sponsor, Jonathan Fisher of Tech Sideline. He sponsored, an attorney who sponsored our website and our podcast for 6 or 7 years. And Jonathan's specialty was DUI and traffic offense. And we had him on, I looked it up yesterday. It was Tech Sideline Podcast 107. And that was from January of 2020. So, Evan, you weren't there for this one. It's when you were still on break. So I hosted it, and Chris and I sat and talked with Jonathan. And we went back and forth, and we talked about Virginia Tech athletics and then talked about his law practice. And towards the end of the podcast, he talked extensively about the type of people and the situations when people get DUIs. And I'm actually going, it's 3 or 4 paragraphs. I actually transcribed what he said. And this is a man with a lot of experience defending people who are charged with DUI. He said, what I discovered, and again, as I discussed earlier, I've defended all sorts of criminals early in my career, and a lot of them. I've seen violent criminals, and I've seen people who steal and who hurt people. I've seen a lot of people with character flaws, just inherent bad people. And again, this is Jonathan Fisher talking. What I discovered is that these first offense DUI folks were not exhibiting bad character. It almost always was a judgment error. Alcohol is a catch-22. You've got a good person and they drink and then they're impaired and the beverage makes you make poor decisions. So it causes a judgment error that leads to being stopped and you get the DUI. And then he said, this to me was interesting. These are not ogres. These are your kids here at Virginia Tech. I represented someone who had never been in trouble and who was almost 70 years old, a well-respected member of the community. These are good people who made a mistake. So that's one group of people that get DUIs. And we probably all know someone like that. And then he said, there's a group that I do represent as well that are repeat offenders. What you have to understand about those people is almost all the time, those people are not bad people either. Those are usually people who really have substance abuse problems and who have addiction problems and they're struggling. There's almost always a backstory to those. These are folks who really need help. And then he wrapped it up by saying, what's funny is I don't necessarily see a whole bunch of overlap between people who in their lives have been convicted of rape or assault and battery or bad crimes like that, and then they get DUIs too. I don't see that very often. It's usually either good people or people who really need help. So that I thought was very interesting background from an attorney who was involved in a lot of DUI defense. And we were sometimes criticized for having him as a sponsor. Why do you have a guy who puts drunk driving people on the road as a sponsor? So I asked him about that on that podcast, and that was his response. That 80 or to 90% of the time, these are good people, productive members of society who made a mistake, or they're people with real issues who need help. And that's why attorneys often get into that sort of defense. They actually want to help people. Nobody wants to put criminals back on the street. They want to help people. So that I thought was an interesting perspective. So the question becomes, which one of those groups does Tyrese Radford fit into? And I don't know, and I don't want to go down that path.
Well, Chris, let me ask you this again. I'll ask the same question I asked Will. What do you think the odds are, given the information we know now, that he plays for Virginia Tech at some point again this season?
This season, I think they're slim to none, and Slim just left town. These legal situations, they take a long time to sort out most of the time. And Virginia Tech doesn't, generally speaking, come to their decision, the university itself, until after that, right? Like Devin Hunter's situation happened in September. Nothing's been resolved there. He's got a court date in February, and we don't even know if it'll get resolved then, right?
All right.
So we could be this summer and Tyrese Radford situation is still up in the air.
And courts are backed up because of COVID.
Right.
We're way backed up.
And that's what concerns me. I don't think Virginia Tech, the university, is going to make a decision on his future until at least they get some idea of what's going to happen with the court situation. So he's going to be hanging around here not knowing whether he's ever going to be allowed to play basketball for Virginia Tech again. And another school is going to come in and say, oh,
Come on down.
Come on down. We'll guarantee you that you can play this year. And he's going to say, okay. And he's going to transfer because this year you can transfer without sitting out a year. Right? So this is an issue that...
He's an outstanding basketball player. There are no doubt people already in his ear.
And he's a special player. There's not many guys like Tyrese Radford.
The cynic in me says he's going to end his career as an all-SEC player for Buzz Williams.
At Texas A&M.
At Texas A&M.
That's the cynic.
That's the cynic in
It's not a prediction, just...
Right. So it's... I'd like to see it get resolved some way as quickly as possible. Look, he's going to be fine from a legal standpoint. People have made far greater mistakes than Tyrese Radford and easily recovered from them and went on to lead long and productive lives.
So can I jump in here and give an example? Cordell Pemsel, when he was at Iowa, was arrested in September of 2019 for driving under the influence. He later pled guilty. This is public record. I'm not revealing anything that you can't look up on the internet with just a search. So September of 2019, he was arrested for DUI, later pled guilty. And Cordell missed 2 games. And this is not some fly-by-night shady program. This is Iowa. It's a Big Ten university.
Yeah, they were a top. They're a very good program.
Yes, yeah. and this is how they dealt with a similar situation. An individual who actually pled guilty. He didn't even go to court. Well, you got to go to court to plead guilty. But so it's interesting. And then Cordell, what eventually led to him leaving Iowa was a few months later. One of the things that happened out of the DUI was his license was the article I read used the words revoked and suspended interchangeably. They're not the same thing. But his license was suspended for 6 months, and in February he was caught driving on that suspended license, and that's when Iowa suspended him indefinitely, and later he left and came to Virginia Tech. So just taking the DUI in and of itself, there is an instance where there's actually a player on Virginia Tech's team who has pled guilty to one and only missed 2 games for the school he was at. And that's taking the DUI in isolation.
And here's the thing. So Pemsel got suspended from Iowa. Did you say he got suspended indefinitely for
the second time around when he?
It sounded like it was 2 separate occasions.
Okay. It was 2 separate instances.
So yes. I find it interesting that that we can admit Cordell Pemsel, who was suspended indefinitely from another school, and say, "Oh, it's okay that you got in trouble at another school, right, but you didn't get in trouble here." And now with Radford, it's, "Oh, you got in trouble here, so that's worse." Right? But that's not just a Virginia Tech thing. That's a double standard thing across the entire country. You see guys get indefinitely suspended from their school, and then another school will take them, and that's just the way it is. I hope Virginia Tech doesn't make any rash decisions with Radford. Radford, everybody comes from a different background. I know some people are concerned about the gun. And I think one of Radford's best friends when he was growing up was shot and killed, right? So some people come from a background and an environment that most people, they just can't understand. And they can't grasp.
Can't comprehend.
That is a normal part of life for some people. It's as normal as getting out of your bed and brushing your teeth, right? I grew up way out in the sticks, right? One of my best friends in middle school, his dad was illiterate. Now, can you imagine growing up in Charlottesville knowing someone that's illiterate?
In suburbia.
Right. Or if anybody watching this from Northern Virginia, can you imagine knowing someone who was illiterate? Well, I did because that was my background, but other people can't understand that. Like most people, if they met an illiterate person, they would be like, "Whoa, wow, I wouldn't think anything of it."
Wow.
Because I was around people like that where I grew up. That's just the way it is where I grew up. Tyrese Radford had a gun on him. That's just the way it is where he grew up.
That's what we're guessing. Now Chris is interviewing him, and give the quote that Tyrese, I asked him specifically about when Buzz Williams left, and he found him in the situation of, I'm at Virginia Tech, a couple thousand miles away from home. I remember Tyrese had redshirted.
Right, Tyrese had redshirted. Right. And he was talking about his options, and he said, it was either here or back to I can't talk today. It was either here or back to Louisiana, and I'm not trying to go back there. I got away from it for a reason. if you dismiss this guy and some crazy thing happens and no other school takes him, and he ends up going back to Baton Rouge, you just hurt him even more.
Yeah.
This is a situation where, yes, he needs to be punished. He needs to understand what he did was a mistake and everything like that. But you can actually use this situation to help him. If you make the wrong decision as a university, you could end up hurting his future even more.
All right.
So I'll be very disappointed if he doesn't play basketball for Virginia Tech ever again.
That was my next question. And again, this is January 27th. There are still information out there that we don't know. But given what we do know, Chris, what are the percentages you think that Tyrese Radford never plays for Virginia Tech again at this point right now? What would you put it at?
I don't know about the percentage, but
I think it depends upon the details of the gun charge.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Some of those gun charges are easy to get out of because, like, you could say something like, if the gun's in the back seat of your car, you'll be like, man, I went to the shooting range yesterday and I just forgot to take it out of my car. There are plenty of people who've gotten off on things like that.
Sort of thing.
But we just don't know the details of that.
The problem is that Mark Berman did report that the gun was, quote, on his person.
That's what the
unquote.
woman said from the, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what his source said. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know anything about getting these things pled down or anything like that. I am in a group text with a lawyer friend. It's him and a couple other guys that I know. And we asked him the other day, in your professional opinion, what do you think will happen? And he said, I think there's a good chance the DUI charge may get pled down. And he's like, I don't know that they'll actually prosecute him for the gun charge.
Interesting.
But he said, in my opinion, and this is his quote, this is the lawyer's quote, he said, in my opinion, Virginia Tech will screw him.
Well, it's a
that's not my quote, that's his.
You know, there are things, as I referred to earlier, that are hot potato issues.
Correct.
And so one of the things that, you know, working in this space and having to be on social media, we're on Twitter all the time, we're on our message boards, we're on Facebook. There is one of the things that's happening in society is that organizations, be they companies or schools or whatever, are falling victim to being what's called being run by Twitter. Mm-hmm. Being the decision-making process is affected by social media backlash, which is often out of proportion, way out of proportion to how people actually feel. So this is a fairly new phenomenon, and I think organizations are still trying to figure it out.
We can take the Justin Fuente situation and do
example.
That. Well, like, if you're on Twitter or even message boards and things like that back in December, it seemed like about 90% of people were done with Justin Fuente and wanted him fired. And then we ran a poll on our site, and what was the number that said?
Something like only about 25 or 30%.
About 25 or 30% said they thought he should be fired after.
So the reality was much different than the perception.
Correct. It's just the people who have an opinion, a strong opinion about something, express it very, very, very loudly.
So the optics of this situation become overarching, and organizations struggle with doing what they feel is right because they just don't want the constant crap storm. Mm-hmm. And Chris was just talking about December, while we're into the end of January, and there isn't a tweet on the Hokies FB account that isn't met with Fire Fuente.
Oh my gosh!
It just goes on on and on.
The grit tweet yesterday. Fuente's on tweet this morning with the video with Sam Rogers. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a nice video having Sam Rogers narrate it, but then all the responses were just
right.
You know.
Yeah.
Let's transition here for a moment, and we talked about the legal side of what Tyrese Radford's going to. I want to talk about what it means for Virginia Tech on the floor. And you look at what he brings to this team and the stats. Tyrese Radford averaging 31 minutes a game, was averaging 11 points per game and 6.3 rebounds per game. He brings toughness, and there aren't a lot of players in the country like Tyrese Radford. So, Will, I know you can't necessarily replace him, but when you look at this Virginia Tech roster, who are the players that are going to have to step up and try and replace the production that Tyrese Radford gave this team?
it was. I mean, I remember when Justin Robinson got hurt 2 years ago, and it is not outlandish to say that Virginia Tech had a team capable of winning the national championship that year if things broke correctly, and that ended when Justin Robinson got hurt. But it didn't turn out to be the complete disaster that we thought it was going to be. Buzz Williams adjusted. He started running the offense through Kerry Blackshear. And Virginia Tech actually had a pretty decent record while Robinson was out. And they wound up being, what was it, a 5 seed?
4 seed.
And then 4 seed. That was an outstanding coaching job. So we're going to find a little bit about what Mike Young is made of, what sort of adjustments can he make. And I don't have the basketball acumen to even know what I'm looking at. I'll just have to listen to people who are smarter than me. So to answer your question, I don't think it's a case of other players stepping up per se, as it is the margin of error for those other players is now razor thin. So you take a look at the Wake Forest game that Tech won. The guy, I don't remember the exact numbers, but Keve Aluma, Naheem Aline, and Jalen Cone, I think, are 3 guys who had.
You got them.
I do got them. So let's go over them. So against Wake Forest, Cone was 0 for 4, Aluma was 1 of 6, and Aline was 1 of 7. So combined, they were 2 of 17. And Virginia Tech won anyway.
And Radford scored 20 in that game, I believe.
Because of Radford and Hunter Couture.
And he made those free throws down the stretch. Radford did.
Yeah, So if you want to go back in time and subtract Tyrese Radford from that game, you're going to lose that game. Not because nobody else is stepping up, but because some of the guys you depend on are having a bad outing. And then you look at Syracuse, and Cone was 1 of 8, 1 of 9 overall, 1 of 8 from 3-point range. Aluma was 1 of 10, and Aline was 6 of 17. So let's do our math. That's 7 of 27, 8 of 36. 8 of 36 from 3 of your best scorers. So all 3 of those guys over the Wake and Syracuse games went 10 of 52 from the field, which is 19.2%, and 7 of 28 from 3-point range, which is 25%. If you want to keep winning ball games, that cannot happen with Tyrese Radford not being in the equation. So that's how I'll answer the question. I'm not going to sit here and say Justin Mutz needs to get more rebounds or Keve Aluma needs to get. I'm just going to say you as a group you gotta step up as a group.
Now let me pose this question because you guys brought this up, and when you said it, I initially wanted to get your thoughts on the podcast because when I think about Tyrese Radford, I think it's fair to say he is the best player on this team. I think it's fair to consistency, and sometimes it doesn't show in the box score, right?
I personally could not make an argument for any other player. I'll be honest.
Yep. Yeah. Especially the last couple of games, you could have made that argument for Aluma, but he struggled the last couple of games. But let me say this: you guys said. What did you feel the NCAA tournament chances were on Saturday?
About 90%.
And what would you say they're at right now?
I don't know, 25, 35,
20, so I'm curious. I was thinking more about 50, 60, even without Radford.
Really?
Why do you think Radford just –
Well, I think Virginia Tech is one of those teams where, as they've shown, they can beat anybody. They're good enough to beat anybody, but they barely beat Wake.
Yep.
And
they didn't shoot the ball well.
They barely beat Duke, and Duke's not that good. And it took them a long time to get rolling against Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And they got hammered by Penn State. It's not like they're going out there and blowing teams' doors off. Like, they were barely getting by some teams that aren't that good, to be quite honest with you.
And their schedule is easier early in the ACC slate.
And it's more difficult down the stretch.
And as I look around the ACC, I see teams that are gaining momentum. 3 weeks ago, I thought this conference is horrible. And now,
I mean, UVA just had to start playing on a regular basis.
Right.
Florida State's looking like the Florida State that they're supposed to be.
Right.
UNC looks like they're getting a little traction.
Pitt. I know they lost to.
And Louisville is still sneaky. So anyways, but you think without Tyrese Radford, I mean, it's going to be tough to do it.
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, it was going to be tough with him, but I think numerically, from a percentage standpoint, like, unless Tech just went on an absolute nosedive down the stretch, they had already won enough games where they were going to get over the hump and go to the NCAA tournament. Now, I think it's just more likely that some of those games, without him, they're just not going to go Tech's way.
Well, let me read the schedule real quick just to jump in, because this schedule is about to get really difficult for Tech. And even with Tyrese Radford, this was going to be a very
Yes, that's
difficult
right.
schedule, right? So we'll talk about the Notre Dame game here in just a moment as we record on Wednesday, January 27th. Hokies are at Notre Dame, who's 5-8 tonight. They already beat the Fighting Irish earlier in the season. On Saturday, 8th-ranked Virginia at home. Then next Wednesday, they're at Pittsburgh. I mean, they are one of the hottest teams in the ACC right now. Then at Miami. They're going to have Chris Likes back and others. Hokies beat Miami earlier in the year, but they were without two of their best players.
And Miami at any point has the talent to beat you.
Oh, my gosh.
Then 16th-ranked Florida State. Then 25th-ranked Louisville. Then at North Carolina. Then at 16th-ranked Florida State. Then Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and at North Carolina State.
Man.
So, yeah, I mean, there's winnable games on there, but they're a lot more winnable with Tyrese Radford on your roster.
I know.
Very good point.
So you look at last year, and after beating Wake Forest on January 14th, Virginia Tech was 13-4 and 4-2 in the ACC. And then along came the canary in the coal mine, which was Syracuse and Castle Coliseum. And if you remember, that game ended 71-69.
Buddy Boeheim made a bunch of threes, and that was the game that Landers Nolly chucked up that three about 3 feet behind the top of the key. And
yeah,
bricked it.
Virginia Tech had a chance to win that basketball game, and Nolly just took like one of the worst game-ending shots I've ever seen in my life.
Didn't he do the same thing later in the year? Did he do it
Yes.
twice?
Forget which game. It might have been Boston College in overtime, but he did something similar.
So, and I was in the stands and took a video of that and actually watched it on my phone the other day. And so they lost that game, and you're like, huh. And then they beat UNC at home in double overtime. And then things nosedived. So at that point, they were 14-5 and 5-3 in the ACC, and they ended up
16.
Yeah. So what is that? 2-11 down the stretch. And before the Radford suspension, I mean, you never know where things are going to go, but it was starting to feel like that to me. And ironically, the team that kind of rang the bell was Syracuse, by the way. They just blew Tech out the other day. And I remember thinking, man, I hope this doesn't go like last year went.
Yeah.
But now Radford's out.
Yeah. The thing is, like the Syracuse game this year, it didn't make me feel anything that I didn't already feel.
Yeah.
Like, I thought we were a team that at times was really, really good and at times was not so good. Look, we're 47th in the net. And I think the net does a pretty good job of accurately defining where teams are as a team. And I've never thought Tech was as good as any of their AP rankings this year. And I know I don't like to say that because it makes me a bad negative fan and all that nonsense. But they didn't look it to me. They looked it against Villanova, but they didn't look it in any other game they played.
Yeah.
So, yes, Tech can still make the NCAA tournament. To me, I don't know anything about X's and O's, and I'm not sure this affects Tech from an X's and O's standpoint too much, but how do you redistribute his 31 minutes?
Right.
I think they'll be able to make up for his 11 points, but not his 6.6 rebounds or his second on the team in assists.
And then the intangibles.
I had literally just written an article about the guy last week about how awesome he is, and I found a good website that puts historical numbers into perspective. And I think for any 6'2" or shorter player at the high major level over like the last 15 years, he's second all time in offensive rebound percentage. I mean, he is one of the best offensive rebounders for a guard ever, not just at Virginia Tech, but in college basketball. And he doesn't play anymore. That's going to have a huge effect.
Yeah, you can't gloss that one over. You can't sit here and puff up your chest and say, "Oh, next
man
up."
Yeah, no, the next man cannot do what Tyrese Radford did. Not exactly what he did. Yeah. Now, if it's Jalen Cone, if Jalen Cone replaces the majority of his minutes, then okay, Jalen had a rough game his last couple outings, but before that, he was dropping like 20 points every night.
Yeah.
So Jalen Cone's not going to go out there and get a bunch of offensive rebounds and energy points, but he's going to bring something different. He's going to make Virginia Tech more of a three-point threat if he takes some of those minutes. So Tech can still win, but it would look different. It would look different. And I hope these guys take it as an opportunity because it is. You know, it stinks for Bradford, but it is an opportunity for someone else.
The Joe Bama Seals, the Darius Maddox.
If you go back far enough, you remember when Deron Washington got suspended for the Wake Forest game in the 2005-2006 season, and he was suspended. I think Coleman Collins had to miss that game because of his dad. So A.D. Vasayo, who was a freshman who had barely played before, goes down there to Wake Forest and drops. And Virginia Tech was 0-6 in the ACC at that point. And Vasayo goes down there in his first ever start and drops 30 points on him.
Yeah.
Right? So you never know when something like that's coming.
Yeah. Yep. All right, we do have a lot more to get to on episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, but wrapping up the discussion on men's basketball as we record on Wednesday, January 27th, Hokies at Notre Dame tonight, 7 o'clock tip. Virginia Tech coming off of a really tough loss at Syracuse over the weekend. Will, do you think they bounce back tonight in their first game without Tyrese Radford?
Magic 8 Ball says probably not. But because one of the things Virginia Tech benefited from in the first outing against Notre Dame was, I believe Notre Dame won something like 6 of 23 from 3-point range.
They made 2 field goals in the entire second half.
Right. Which is an ACC record.
Their top player, what's his name?
Leshevsky.
Yeah, he only attempted 1 3-pointer the entire game. Tech did such a great job on him.
They are one of the better shooting and one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the conference.
Mm-hmm. He's a 55% 3-point shooter.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And he's 6'10". Or something.
Gosh,
something like that.
And they've won 2 in a row. They beat Boston College and they just beat Miami 73-59.
See, here's why I think Tech is going to win. I don't think Notre Dame is good enough to win 3 games in a row. The law of averages.
I was about to say, is that the law of averages?
Yeah, here we go.
Right, yes, that's exactly what it is.
In the law of averages.
I certainly think Tech could lose tonight. I'm not going to go out and place a bet on it. Either way.
So here's some historical context. What was the first game after Justin Robinson got hurt?
Wasn't it Miami? No, he got hurt in the Miami game.
It was NC State, wasn't it?
No, I don't think that was the first one.
Oh, I think it was. I think it was the really low scoring, the infamous 47-24
I don't think that was the first
game.
One, though.
So Malcolm, do you remember where we watched that game? Was it BW3?
It was B-Dubs, yeah.
It was B-Dubs.
Yeah,
so I remember walking into B-Dubs and the spread was something like NC State by a few points. And I thought, man, I would bet the house on that. They're going to destroy Tech. And no, that's not the way it went. So you never know.
Yeah.
What
But
did they score, 24 points?
Yeah, 24 points.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, I'm going to look up that schedule right now.
All right.
Well, how about this? We'll revisit it in the comment sections. We'll lead off with that for our YouTube live questions. Real quick, do want to note, as I checked Twitter, John Rothstein tweeted out that Cordell Pemsel, with his back injury, will not play tonight against Notre Dame per Mike Young. So he's been out the last couple of games, will not return tonight against Notre Dame. All right, we'll step aside for a break here on episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. When we come back, we talk about the potential loss of co-defensive line coach Darryl Tapp leaving the Virginia Tech football program. It's all coming up on episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by Anytime Fitness, Southeast Regional Training Center, and Campus Emporium. Welcome back in to episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. It is so great to have you with us. Evan Hughes alongside of Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. If you have a question for Will or Chris, be sure to drop it in the YouTube live chat, and I'll read those at the end of the show. Campus Emporium is proud to sponsor the Tech Sideline community. A portion of every sale is returned to Virginia Tech in support of its endowment for excellence, student programming, and need-based scholarships. We have been serving the Virginia Tech community for over 25 years from our locations in Blacksburg and our online store. Please visit the #1 source for Virginia Tech merchandise at campusemporium.com, or come see us at 207 North Main Street or 1337 South Main Street. It was hard to keep a straight face during that read as I look over across the way. For those that are watching, you see Will right now wearing a Virginia Tech Klondike beanie. We need to get this on social media.
Oh, yes. This thing, so Virginia Tech Klondike beanie. Yeah. Sorry, my mic was away from my face there. Virginia Tech Klondike beanie, $27.99 at Campus Emporium.
That is the good deal.
And it's so let me read you the description. The description's interesting. It says, this Virginia Tech trooper hat, so you can call it a Klondike beanie or you can call it a trooper hat, is lined with faux shearling. Don't believe I've ever heard that word, for added warmth. So you got button flaps here. You got the adjustable, here are the button flaps. They're up here, so you can put them down over your ears. Adjustable hook and loop fastener to secure it under your chin. You got a little Velcro there for that. Shell's 100% polyester. Lining's 100% polyester. This is not something you, in my opinion, that you buy and wear every day. This is the thing that you buy that you wear once a year to that football game that's always super cold.
Or tomorrow.
Every year.
When
it's going to be snowing.
Yeah, it's going to snow overnight with winds of 35 miles an hour.
Yeah, I'm telling you, if I can't get my car out of my parking lot tomorrow morning and I have to walk to the gym at 7 or 7:30 in the morning, I'm going to wish I had that.
You know what? I'll let you take it out of here with you.
That's a good idea.
Right? Chris wishes he had a Klondike beanie, $27.99.
And we'll drop the link in the video description. And I'm actually going to wear it for a little while. And if you are thinking of Cousin Eddie and Christmas Vacation, so is everybody else.
Great show so far. Episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're going to talk about Virginia Tech football here in just a moment. We'll touch on Virginia Tech men's soccer. Some great news. We'll talk about Virginia Tech wrestling, Virginia Tech women's basketball, and then we will get to your questions. Not a ton in the chat, so if you got them, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the show. Transitioning from the hardwood to the gridiron, we talk about Virginia Tech football, where while it is not official, all reports are indicating that Virginia Tech co-defensive line coach and VT alum Darryl Tapp is leaving the Virginia Tech football program to take a position with the San Francisco 49ers. He was hired in 2019. Chris, you see Darryl Tapp on social media. He's the energizer. You can almost feel the energy just watching him on TV. I know he's beloved by the staff and the players. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a loss would Darryl Tapp be?
Depends on how he's replaced. I have an article written up, a short little news blurb saying he's accepted the job with the 49ers. I haven't run it yet because the 49ers haven't officially made the announcement, but, we'll go ahead and say it. Yes, he's going to the 49ers, right? Unless something drastically changes, he's out. He's the assistant defensive line coach, and he's the recruiter of the 757. So ideally, you find someone who has 757 recruiting ties who also can be an assistant defensive line coach, right? And you just plug it right in, and you keep going. Does that person exist, though? I can't think of anyone. With 757 recruiting ties, who's also I got nothing outside of Chris Ellis.
Right, that name's been floated, and I don't.
But the highest level Chris Ellis has coached at is New Hampshire.
Right.
Now, granted, that's more coaching experience than Darryl Tapp had when he
was an analyst at Vanderbilt.
Right.
Exactly. So this is a pretty fast career arc for Darryl. It's going from being an analyst at Vanderbilt in 2018 to being a DL coach for the
49ers 2 years later. So credit to Justin Fuente. He identified a good coach and hired him.
Right.
So now you've got to try to do it again. But I don't know that there's just anybody out there like Tapp, exactly like Tapp. Another thing you could do, I suppose, is reshuffle your staff to a certain extent. If you're really serious about getting a guy on the staff to recruit the 757, then maybe you would have to fire another coach, and you could to reshuffle your staff and give Tyrlink the entire defensive line.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a whole lot of things that you could think about. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't know that Tech has the money to go out and do much, because I know they just built that student athlete performance center, and they haven't been able to properly staff it with a chef and everything like that. So if you're expecting some sort of flashy hire, you're not going to get it. And I know a lot of people were saying they needed to give him a raise, but it wasn't about the money for Tapp.
Yeah.
But I don't think the money was there to give him a raise anyway, because, like I said, right now they haven't even been able to hire a chef for their new flashy new student athlete performance center. So yes, that student athlete performance center is there, but it's not really serving any purpose right now because nobody's really working in it because they're.
We've gone over this before. Witt has said there will be roughly a $20 million shortfall for this year. It's one thing to hear that number on paper and then actually think what that means in real terms. Right. A lot of people have lost their jobs over there. Kenny Brooks got an extension, but we don't know the details.
We don't know the financial details. Yeah,
I would guess they're not great.
Tony Roby also got an extension.
Yeah, well, Tony's Tony.
yeah.
Tony can raise the money to get his own.
To pay himself.
Yeah, pay himself if he wanted to.
Go to southeastrtc.com. I do want to bring this up. I don't know if you guys saw with the coaching change at Marshall that Cornell Brown
and JC
does not look like he'll be returning to Marshall. Right. So,
well, we tried Cornell once before and it didn't work.
That's right. He was on staff
he was on Beamer's last staff.
Yeah,
he was on the staff from 2012 through 2015.
Yes,
2011 through 2015.
I think it was 2012 through 2015.
Well, it was whatever year Cavs stopped coaching.
Yeah,
right. So it would have been 2011.
Okay,
but that didn't work out. He was not very good on the recruiting trail. I don't think Cornell's a bad coach or anything like that. He's an old school guy. I don't think he's the type that goes head to head with UNC coaches in the modern game of recruiting and makes a difference.
Right.
Because, he was this recruiting it was him and Kurt Newsom in the 757 before.
Yeah,
and it didn't go too well for Virginia Tech, so I don't consider that an option.
And I don't know that J.C. Price is a solution for recruiting either.
Right. I think J.C. would do fine as a coach.
Right. Yeah. J.C. was at Marshall for 9 years.
Yeah.
So let's look at. So you mentioned, Will, when Tracy Claeys announced his retirement, how he was the second highest paid assistant coach on staff, and you said look out for maybe Virginia Tech to go after an analyst or maybe some type of an assistant on the support staff. And now with Darryl Tapp likely leaving, what kind of flexibility does Justin Fuente now have with shaping his staff or his support staff?
Well, the bottom line is we don't know, because there's been references made and discussions had about the Football Enhancement Fund, an extra, $5 million a year between donors and the university for the football program. $5 million a year is a lot of money. That still is not official and not approved by the BOV. If that happens, that'll happen in March.
In March, right.
Right.
So and as far as the money from the donor end, we thought it was going to start coming in before then, but it just doesn't appear that it has if they don't have like a chef hired for the student athlete performance. Although do you count that towards football? I don't know.
The SAPC covers all sports,
Right,
so
right.
These are questions for which we don't have the answers, and so
now if go ahead. Sorry.
Well, maybe a timing thing. Fuente may not do anything for, I don't know when the next BOV meeting is. How does it overlap with spring practice?
There's actually no great hurry to go out and replace Tapp right now. It's not like you can go out and recruit.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
So you can let things play out for a little bit and to get a better idea of your options and stuff like that.
To get a better idea of what your funding is going to be.
Right.
Is the BOV going to say yes, the university will pitch in the other half?
Right. So I don't think it's necessarily as big a deal to get a guy hired right away as it is in most years. Just simply because of the nature of recruiting these days. Now, one rumor is that they could promote graduate assistant Zach Sparber to defensive line coach, and I'm sure would do fine from a coaching standpoint, but he's never recruited before. He's extremely inexperienced, and if Virginia Tech did that would kind of give you an idea of where they are from a monetary standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point again, though, they don't necessarily have to promote someone to the co-defensive line. I'm assuming that Bill Tierling could coach the entire D line.
He could. They don't necessarily have to do that. Like for example, maybe if you wanted to get a tie into the 757, you could bring in Chris Beatty, and then you could have an inside receivers coach and an outside receivers coach or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But it almost does have to be another defensive coach, because then you'd only have, I guess, you'd have
three defensive coaches.
You'd have Hamilton, Ryan Smith, Jack Tyler, and Bill Tierling, 4 defensive coaches.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be balanced, so it does really need to be a defensive coach, I think, from that standpoint. But maybe not. Well, I don't know what he'll do. I have no ideas. Normally, I have ideas about what's the right thing to do.
That's a good
I don't
point.
have any now.
But what's interesting is there's no rush. That's the thing to take away from this. They could take a couple of months to figure out what the next step's going to be.
I don't think there's a big rush. Yes, ideally, you'd like to have a recruiter on staff as quickly as possible, but I just don't know that that'd make a big difference right now.
Yeah, with visits not being allowed until April at the earliest, and we don't even know if there's going to be spring football around the country.
So we're an hour into episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, and you know what song is stuck in my head right now? Tell Me Something Good. Because we have spent the last 60 minutes, a lot of dense topics, a lot of tough things to talk about. You're probably sitting there and listening or watching and saying, gosh, tell me something good. There is some good to talk about here towards the end of the show, and this deserves a lot of attention. I want to transition from talking about football to men's soccer. Men's soccer and women's soccer are two sports that are super consistent year in and year out. NCAA tournament qualifiers. You talk about tough ACC competition. I mean, good Lord. Men's soccer and women's soccer, it doesn't get tougher than the ACC. Last year our women's soccer team didn't qualify for the ACC tournament, but their resume was so good they were able to host a first-round NCAA tournament match. That is how good it's harder to win the ACC tournament. We'd say that about basketball.
Sure.
Same thing with soccer. It's harder to win the ACC tournament, I think, than the NCAA tournament. So
I'd certainly make that argument.
But the competition is terrific. And last week, a special day for Virginia Tech men's soccer, as Daniel Pereira was selected with the number 1 overall selection. He's going to Austin FC, the number 1 pick in the draft. That's a huge deal, Chris.
And that's an expansion team. So he is their first pick in the history of the entire team. Ever. Yeah. So that's a huge, huge deal. So now there are 3 Virginia Tech athletes who have been number 1 picks in their sport before.
That was one of my favorite tweets. It showed Michael Vick and Bruce Smith and Daniel Pereira.
Yeah.
And it's a great story, Pereira.
Yeah, it is. From Roanoke. How about that? That's that Roanoke High School. Was it Northside?
Northside.
With 2 first-round picks? Did the UVA guy end up being a first-round pick?
I don't know off the top of my head.
But I think he was. I'm not certain. But 2 very, very high picks either way. Both for the same club soccer team in the city of Roanoke too. For both those guys to be number 1. I don't want to take a turn to negative town here, but this is the best player in school history, and we got him for 7 games his sophomore year, and he's gone because of COVID.
It was very quick. He played his freshman year.
The same thing happened to the baseball team this year. They had
Ian Seymour.
They had one of the best batteries in school history. What was the catcher?
Carson Taylor.
Yes. Ian Seymour was just hitting his stride as a player, and so was Carson Taylor. And how many games did they get to play?
They got 1 ACC series in. I'm telling you, Virginia Tech baseball is going to have a good, much better year.
I'm just saying, we had some of our best athletes ever this year across various sports, and we didn't really get to see them play. Pereira, Stickler, Caleb Farley.
The women were about to go to their first NCAA tournament.
That's right.
Since 2006.
Seymour's one of the best pitchers
basketball
in school history. Yeah. And
right now, people can't watch Mekhi Lewis Russell.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to go down that.
No.
But yes. Number 1 picks, that they generally get into the rotation fairly quickly, even if he has to. I haven't done my research on this, but maybe he could go out on loan for a year to another team. But seems to be a pretty exciting midfield prospect, like a box-to-box type. Pretty creative player. He's 19 years old, right?
He's very crafty.
Yeah.
He's great with set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
He's from I believe he's from Venezuela too, and then moved to Roanoke.
Right.
And I tell you what, seeing the pictures, I want to give a tip of the hat to Hokie Vision and everybody doing a great job of documenting that day. I believe they were in the President's Suite in Lane Stadium.
They did a great job. Like, I had a good idea that he was going to get drafted pretty high. I thought there was a chance he could go number one.
But it was a surprise.
I didn't think it would actually happen that he would go number one, although I did think he would go pretty high. Patrick Nyorko was considered the best player in school history, and he played for 3 years from Virginia Tech, 2005 to 2007 era. And I think he was, the 7th overall pick in the MLS draft. And he ended up playing over 200 games in the NMLS in his career for the Chicago Fire and DC United. And he actually capped for Ghana once.
Wow.
So he was an international player once. So, and that was as the 7th pick overall. So for Pereira, you're by that standard, you're looking at a very long and successful career.
So one of the things that's interesting to me about this is you look at some of the greatest athletes of all time at Virginia Tech, guys like Bruce Smith, Michael Vick, Angela Tincher, Queen Harrison, people like that, Mekhi Lewis.
Oh, he's in that conversation.
They actually accomplished things in their time here at Virginia Tech. They were here for a while and did things. And here you have an individual who's number one pick in the draft who barely played, as you said, for Virginia Tech. I find that interesting.
Now, Christo Strickler, also want to mention, he was drafted 30th overall. He's going to Houston. And Strickler is someone who's had a very storied career. I mean, he has been the guy up front for Virginia Tech, the top goal scorer for the last couple of years. So, big day for men's soccer. Daniel Pereira, the number one overall pick. Again, he joins Michael Vick, Bruce Smith, as the only the three of them to go number one in a professional draft. So
this is a big deal.
So tell me something good. That's part one. Part two, Chris Coleman likes to beat UVA, right?
Who doesn't?
There you go. And wrestling did that on Friday. 8th ranked Virginia Tech knocked off Virginia in wrestling 19-15 in a duel inside of Castle Coliseum. Will, you watched the duel. What were your thoughts?
As I wrote in my recap, everything just kind of went true to form. One of the websites I like to look at is WrestleStat, and WrestleStat, based on a database of results and rankings, you pick two teams and it will break down every weight class and what is likely to happen. And WrestleStat predicted a 17-15 win for Virginia Tech. I think probably with a couple of major decisions thrown in there. But Tech winning 5 weight classes, UVA winning 5 weight classes, and winning a match is worth 3 points. If it's a major decision, it's worth 4. Is it a tech fall is 5 and an actual pin,
or a forfeit is 6?
Yeah. So it went exactly like the computer said it would, except for there was a tech fall for Virginia Tech, and there was an extra major decision in there or something.
Yeah, it was number 8 Corbin Myers with a major decision over 12th ranked and unbeaten Louis Hayes, which was, Corbin's beaten him 3 times before, and I believe he's majored him, but Louis Hayes was wrestling really well. That was a statement win. And then Sam Latona with a tech fall at 125.
What is a tech fall?
Tech fall is if you win at any point. I believe. Gosh, I need to have my notes in front. I believe it's 15 points at any point if it gets to that.
So if 15, you're just dominating the match and the ref's just like, okay, it's over.
He had a real flurry there at the end, whereas it's interesting to look at the score because it says tech fall at 7 minutes. Mm-hmm. Because he did something right at the end. I think he got what's it called? A near fall.
He got near fall points right before the horn.
Right.
So it's like a TKO in boxing then. You don't actually knock the guy out, but the ref's like, okay, yeah. This is
any point you get up by 15, it's over.
Okay.
Yeah, so Corbin Myers may be a guy that the computers and the rankings aren't picking up on yet.
Yep.
I don't want to compare apples and oranges, but like when Mekhi Lewis went into the NCAA championships a couple of years ago, seeded 8th, he was underseeded.
Yep.
Corbin Myers, I think, based on what we've seen so far, I don't think the computers and the rankings have really picked up on how good he is. I'm not saying he's going to win a national championship. I just think he's better than.
I also think someone flying under the radar is Bryce Andonian, 12th in the country, major decision, 8-0 win over Denton Spencer, a guy who led UVA in pins a year ago. And I tell you what, the big, and it's a good problem to have right now if you're Tony Roby, but John Borst, at least last week, is the highest ranked wrestler in the ACC. He's ranked 15th. And Virginia Tech has a stud freshman, true freshman named Hunter Katka. Yeah. And they are both really talented. And Katka got the start over Borst.
Right.
Because, and part of that, Borst lost to Quinn Miller, who's ranked 20th for UVA. But, you've got one of the best wrestlers at heavyweight in the ACC, and you got Katka right on his heels.
Competition, man.
Depth.
And really great recruits. And so... and a lot of these wrestlers do redshirt, so it's rare to see true freshmen get in. The thumbs up. Give it to the camera,
Chris.
Chris.
It took us over an hour. It took us an hour and 9 minutes.
So, anyways, that's the news about wrestling. They have a big week coming up. They wrestle Duke on Friday.
So they wrestle at Duke on Friday, and that was a regularly scheduled matchup, and that's going to be at 5 p.m. on streaming on the ACC Network Extra. And then the UNC match, which was postponed, since Virginia Tech's going to be down in the Raleigh-Durham area, they rescheduled the UNC dual meet for Saturday, and that is going to be at 3 p.m. And last I saw, the streaming or television for that was TBD. So I don't know. So fans that don't know wrestling are like, whoa, you can wrestle 2 days in a row? It's similar to the phenomenon of softball pitchers just pitching day after day. And people who follow baseball are like, whoa, you can do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and in wrestling in particular, so one of the discussions that's going on our wrestling board is, to put it kindly, Duke is really bad at wrestling. Virginia Tech can actually probably wrestle their entire second-string wrestlers and still beat Duke handily.
Correct.
So... Now, that said, you can wrestle multiple times in a day. Bryce Andonian wrestled 3 times in one day, right?
The quad meet in Morgantown, or Sam Latona did, but one was a forfeit.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of guys were wrestling twice.
Yeah, so guys will not only wrestle on consecutive days, they'll wrestle multiple times in one
So that's
day.
the beauty. With a lot of competition at weight classes, you're going to see a lot of those guys get opportunities on Friday. So
yeah, so a lot of guys will get to wrestle against Duke. Yes. Like WrestleStat says. Now, WrestleStat puts the starting lineups against each other, and they've got Tech beating Duke 42-0.
Wow.
Now, just winning all 10 weight classes with regular decisions is 30-0. So if you're piling on another 12 bonus points, It's so that's a hideous mismatch. So Tony Roby will do some things with his pieces there.
God.
And then you've got UNC the next day, and we'll see what happens there. That's a big one. Now, WrestleStat says Tech will win a narrow one over UNC.
There you have it. One day we're going to get Chris Coleman to a duel when things get back to normal. We're going to make Chris a wrestling fan. I can see you will like wrestling, Chris. I really do believe that. You'll.
Every now and then, I had a bunch of friends that wrestled in high school, and if I was in the weight room after school for football, every now and then I'd go in there if they needed an extra body and wrestle a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of the rules, so it was kind of like
free for all.
It was a mess, but yeah.
All right, last sport we'll talk about before we get to your questions on YouTube. If you're watching, we don't have a ton. Be sure to drop them in. We'll get to them in just a moment. Touch on Virginia Tech women's basketball. They are 7-7 and 2-7 in ACC play, and heartbreaking loss on Sunday to second-ranked North Carolina State. They were up double digits, ended up losing 89-87 in Raleigh to one of the best teams in the country.
NC State's ranked number 2, and they were missing a player who's better
Elizabeth Cunane, their center, who's one of the top players in the country.
She's even better than Boots Radford. She was leading them in points. She is leading them in points, rebounds, and blocks. And she could not play. I think it was COVID.
Not 100%. I did not get a chance to watch. Was following along on Twitter.
NC State, I believe, had taken a couple of weeks off because COVID had gone through their program. So it was a prime opportunity. They're number 2 in the country, but they're rusty and they're missing their best player. And Tech had him down 81-70 with 4.5 minutes left to go, and gave up a 16-0 run, and wound up losing by a few points.
I thought we were talking about positive things now.
Well, it's been a rough week. It's been a rough 4 or 5 days.
Well, it's been tough for they've been right there. You think about 2-7 in the ACC. Number 2 Louisville at home lost 71-67. In Atlanta, 56-54 loss. Then they beat North Carolina, 67-64 loss to Wake Forest, 65-60 loss to Notre Dame, 89-87 loss to number 2 North Carolina State.
So going into that NC State game, I think they were 2-6, correct?
Correct.
And yet their point totals in ACC play was a deficit of 1 point.
Yeah.
So that's how close all these things had been.
so many close losses, but it's the same story every year, right? It's like I remember going to the movies to watch The Hangover 2, and I was just like, wow, that was the exact same movie as the first Hangover, right?
So one of the exceptions is they did hang on and beat North Carolina, and one of the reasons they beat North Carolina is Kayla King had a couple 3-pointers, boom, boom, really close to each other. And they have not been getting those sort of plays late in games. Not only have they not been getting those sort of winning plays, they've been making losing plays, turning the ball over and that sort of thing.
All right, let's transition and let's get to some questions here on YouTube Live. There we go. Questions are starting to trickle in. Episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We've talked about so many different sports. Now to our favorite part. Let's get some questions from anybody. TKK Cali on the chat says, Anytime Fitness, member in Lovingston, Virginia. Good place. So,
indeed. Where's Lovingston?
Where is that's a good question. I actually have no idea where that is.
I am Googling it as we speak.
First time question, I believe, for Chris Berry. Chris, thanks for writing. If Tapp is gone, does Chris, since his biggest concern has been quarterback development, think hiring a quarterback coach would be good, and then Cornelson could focus on OC?
I don't know. I don't know if there's another example in the country of there being an offensive coordinator who's only an offensive coordinator who doesn't have a position to coach. Yeah. We'd have to research that. But if something like that happens, it doesn't happen very often. And then you run into the issue of there not being a 757 specialist on the staff. I have no idea if that's even necessary anymore, but public perception says it is. So, it seems like a good idea to at least try it.
Well, I know UNC's getting players from there, so why can't Virginia Tech?
Right.
Sorry.
So I don't think they'll go that route. But yes, there are different options for Fuente to reshuffle his staff if he thought that was best.
Okay. When we were talking about potential different...
So the questioner was from Lovingston, Virginia?
Yes. Before they were saying that
that's in Nelson County, southwest of Charlottesville.
Nelson County High School was in our district in high school. That was a long bus trip.
Yeah, I ran cross country my senior year in high school, and
I was almost to Charlottesville.
Yeah,
all the way from Danville. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the way up.
And I remember there was one guy who ran for Nelson County, and he and I were roughly the same speed, and I'd wind up next to this guy in all these invitational meets.
And, Nelson County's right on 29, right? And right on the left. So it was a long trip, but you never changed roads. You never turned the entire time until you turned into the high school. 29
goes from Charlottesville through Nelson County, Lynchburg, right? And then down into Danville.
Yep.
We were talking about different suspensions, how long something could be. I do want to chime in. Matt Hart says Grayson Allen was trying to end careers and only missed one game. Just thought that would get a chuckle out of the crowd. Yeah. Let's see. Ronnie Adams, any thoughts on the Tennessee dumpster fire? I do think they made two good hires. So for those that didn't see, they hired the Central Florida athletic director, and then he hired Josh Heupel, who was his coach at UCF.
They should probably hire some of Central Florida's players too while they're at it.
So that's been announced because I missed it. Heupel is going to be the head coach.
I think they announced it this morning.
Let me. I'm pretty sure I woke up to that. Yeah. But let me. UCF's Josh Heupel named Tennessee Volunteers football coach. That was quick. I think that was like last week. They made the announcements. I mean, that was a quick turnaround.
Seems like a good athletic director hire. I don't know about Heupel. I mean, Heupel took over a really strong program, and he was there for, 2 or 3 years. So
Scott Frost built UCF.
Well, Scott Frost was only there for 2 years, right?
But he did. I believe he took over for George O'Leary when they went 0-12 at one point. So he really did kind of take that program from the bottom.
I don't know. I mean, a whole lot of coaching hires look good on paper, and then they turn out to not be good. I think Tennessee, from the outside looking in, unless you really pay attention closely, seems like a good job, but I don't think it's a very good job. I think their fan base is crazy. I think anybody that would allow their former head coach to actually hijack the football program and install himself as an athletic director, that's like a Cold War coup d'etat, right?
I'll put it this
way. Some Balkan
way.
Country.
Just because Phil Fulmer is retiring doesn't mean he's going away.
Well, I read something that he's going to be paid the rest of his contract through like 2022 or 3.
I'm sure he will.
I can't confirm that, but that was something that was.
I'm just talking about political influence and making phone calls and mucking up the works.
Yeah,
you know?
I think you're getting a nice raise if you go to Tennessee. First couple months, you're going to have a honeymoon period, and then after that, you're going to feel like you just walked into the lion's den.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes in that program that
I can't comprehend.
I can't comprehend it. They just seem like dumpster fire is the right word.
But it does look like a really good hire at the AD level.
Danny White is the AD.
And he was at Buffalo before that, right? I'm pretty sure he was at Buffalo and
Oh yeah. That Buffalo before UCF, and he did a really good job.
Yeah,
at Buffalo.
Buffalo was once the worst football program in the country.
Here's the thing: Curry was a really good hire as an AD too.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
and they hijacked him. Their own fan base and his own boss, Fulmer, hijacked him.
Tennessee chewed him up and spit him out.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
real quick, I just want to mention. So it was January 18th when Jeremy Pruitt was fired for cause. And they had a press conference that day with the chancellor, the school president, what's the football coach we were just talking about, Phil Fulmer. And it's January 27th, and within that time, they have hired a new athletic director who conducted a search and has hired a football coach in, 9 days? It's amazing.
I guess it's a lot easier to hire an athletic director and a football coach within that short a period of time if they're both from the same school. Right? You just go down there and say, hey, we want both of you. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the conversations have been had before that press conference.
Yeah, this stuff was in the works.
Yeah.
Okay, transitioning. Another question from Ronnie Adams. What do y'all think of the NCAA tournament locks skipping the ACC tournament?
It's not going to shock me a bit if that happens.
If you want to talk about Virginia Tech possibly making the NCAA tournament, if Louisville, UVA, FSU, Duke's not going to skip it because it doesn't look like Duke's going to be fast-tracked to the NCAA tournament. If some of the upper teams drop out, and Evan, if this becomes a 3-round tournament as opposed to 4 or 5 rounds or however many,
or even
ones
a 2-round tournament, maybe.
Right.
Who knows?
You get, and that's the thing about back when conferences used to be 8 teams. If you got hot, you could win 3 games in 3 days and go to the NCAA tournament. These days, you got to win 4. And in the Big East one year, wasn't it? You had to win 5. They were so big.
Like that. Yeah,
you know,
it was massive.
So it's interesting to think about. So what do we think about it? Everybody's going to say it's because of COVID, but wow, that's interesting. I'm going to quit talking because I haven't really pondered it yet.
I think if you're a lock for the NCAA tournament, if you're Florida State or you're UVA, and you have nothing to gain, really. Why risk going to the ACC tournament, contracting COVID there, and then not being able to play in the NCAA tournament? Right. Because they're not going to wait 2 weeks for you to reopen your program to play the NCAA tournament. No, you're forfeiting if you can't play. Well, and so wouldn't it be better to just sit back in your little bubble and not go to the ACC tournament?
What I'm curious about is and I need to look at the dates here because I thought I read somewhere that for the NCAA tournament you're going to have to test negative. I think it's 6 times before you arrive in the state of Indiana, where they are kind of doing a bubble in the state of Indiana for the NCAA
6
tournament.
times in what amount of time?
That's what I don't know. So I'm curious if, in like previous years, with ACC tournaments, the weekend leading up to the NCAA tournament.
Oh, well, right. ACC tournament normally ends on a Sunday, and then that Thursday the NCAA tournament starts.
The playing games start as early as Tuesday and Wednesday, right? And then so
typically, but
that's what I'm saying. So I'm curious to see how that all works out because if you've got to test negative that many times,
I wonder if you have to test 6 days in a row.
Yeah. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, Kyle writes, what is the financial loss to the NCAA and the other locals that depend on the NCAA tournament for money? Now that it's being played only in Indy and presumably under limited attendance, how does that work for the rest of the NCAA?
I don't know that like we went to the NCAA tournament in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, generally, there's such big cities that it's kind of a blip on the radar from as far as localities and things like that. it's beneficial and it helps and everything like that, but it's not going to break the bank. It's not like a football game weekend in Blacksburg, right? Well, it'll actually wreck the town if there's places in Blacksburg that are not reopening. Boudreaux's is not reopening, right?
Yeah.
I guess Bull and Bones will reopen. We'll see. But, like, this has the potential to wreck Blacksburg completely if there's no crowds this year in football. It's already wrecked it to a certain extent, but it could basically kill it if there's no football this year. It's not like that for a big city for NCAA tournament games, I don't think. I don't know how it'll affect the schools. Like, I imagine the teams they're not getting their full revenue checks from TV contracts this year simply because there's so many games getting canceled, and a network is not going to pay for a game that doesn't happen, right? So I imagine the checks are going to be smaller, even if the NCAA tournament gets played, if the conference tournaments get played. Well, let's say there's only 8 teams, and is the tournament in Charlotte or Greensboro?
I believe it's Greensboro.
So if there's only 8 teams,
they moved it to Greensboro.
If there's only 8 teams in Greensboro instead of 15, that's a lot fewer games, and it's just not going to be worth as much money because there's not as many games. And if NCAA tournament games gets canceled, do you think CBS is going to pay for a game that doesn't happen?
Yeah,
absolutely not. So I think the checks for teams are going to be smaller this year than normal.
Final question from Eric Fisher. I know defensive line coaches don't often become DCs. Will we see Tapp move up the coaching ranks past DL? Defensive line.
I don't know. It's so hard to say because the guy's only been a coach for 1 year.
Yeah.
And it was an 11-game season. I didn't attend a single game in Lane Stadium. I've never watched him coach in person, even in a regular drill and a practice.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. I can't.
So let's jump back to the previous topic. The NCAA in 2019 made $933 million off the tournament in that 3 weeks. That's revenue to the NCAA. That some of it goes to operating costs and the rest of it gets distributed to the member schools. So
what if a third of the games gets canceled? Does that mean $300 million less revenue? I mean, if there's no TV game, if those games aren't on TV, if they're not actually played.
Yeah, I don't know what they've decided there.
Yeah.
Great questions today. One more. Ryan says, do you see Hooker sticking with the Vol since Pruitt was fired?
I would assume that. Well, I know Jordan Williams already moved into his apartment in Blacksburg, Hooker's apartment in Blacksburg. So if he went back to Tech, then he'd have to find a different place to live. But I would assume classes have already started there. So. And that he was enrolled or in the process of enrolling?
Well, sometimes in chaos there is opportunity. You know, I mean, it may be better for Hendon Hooker that you have a new athletic director and a new football coach. Everybody's starting with a clean slate.
Chaos is a ladder. Wasn't that a Game of Thrones?
Chaos is a ladder. Game of Thrones.
There you go. Hour and 26 minutes of great content on episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Thanks to everybody for writing in some questions. Will, I'm impressed that you kept the... let me make sure I get the wording right here. The
Klondike
beanie on for the entire second half of the podcast. Well done.
Yeah, I got to turn it over to Chris now. So if he has to walk to the gym in the morning, he can stay warm.
So Virginia Tech men's basketball in action tonight on Wednesday against Notre Dame, on Saturday against Virginia. And that means we'll have a lot of hoops to break down as we go back to our regularly scheduled programming on Monday mornings, the podcast at 10 a.m. on Monday. And who knows what other news. Not that I know anything, but I'm just saying, who knows what we'll be talking about on Monday, right? I was
about to say it can't get much worse, but you never truly knows.
All the news during the off season is bad news.
Yeah.
Chris, any idea? You know what? I'm going to ask a different question today, folks, instead of what's coming up on TSL this week. What are you writing in your Friday Q&A this week, Chris?
I don't know. I haven't asked for questions on the board yet, Evan. I always do that on Thursday.
I would like to take credit for something here. His excellent article yesterday about the 2017 recruiting class was my idea.
It was his suggestion.
Right.
There you go. It's a great read.
So today, I know what I'll work on today, and I won't have time to finish all the research today, but I'll work on my past running backs of the PFF era. I'll do a lot of the research today. I want to write a basketball column, but I schedule my basketball columns for Thursdays, and I want to see what we look like without Tyrese Radford before I jump to any emotional conclusions and things like that. So there'll be a basketball column tomorrow.
Here's what's on techsideline.com right now. $84.99 the annual price, $29.99 the student price, $8.49 the monthly price. Great stuff. So a look back that's on the homepage right now, Virginia Tech's 2017 recruiting class. A scouting report from Brandon Patterson on Connor Blumrick. If anyone's interested in the Texas A&M transfer, the quarterback, there's a great article there, as well as some wrestling content. Go back and read the Q&A from last week about Comcast, Darryl Tapp, recruiting, New Jersey, the state, and more.
One of the things I want to point out about Tapp before we close out.
Yep. Final word.
I don't think we addressed this, but Tapp's wife is a realtor. She's in real estate in Northern Virginia. She did not move to Blacksburg with her husband because she has career goals of her own. All right, this isn't just about Darryl Tapp. It's easier to sell house. You make more money selling houses in Northern Virginia than you do in Blacksburg. And moving to San Francisco, where the average house price is $1.3 million a year. Yes, it's more expensive to live, but if you're selling those houses, you're going to make up for that real fast. So people are like, oh, the cost of living is higher. He's not going to bring in as much money. Yeah, he probably will. He probably will end up a richer man working out there because of what his wife does. So,
I would imagine the Niners have friends in real estate and they will hook her up with a job.
Yeah, otherwise they'd never be able to hire any coaches out there, right?
Yeah.
But I want to point that out. That like, I'm not blaming Tapp's wife or anything. I'm just saying this is, you know how difficult it is to live a year without your spouse because they're doing their job somewhere else and you're doing your job somewhere else. And it might even have been that way when he was at Vandy for a year. I don't know. But this is an opportunity for them to actually live together like a real live man and wife again. In a place where both their goals can be accomplished at the same time. It was a no-brainer decision for him from that standpoint.
For the fans wanting Virginia Tech to just throw more money at Tapp,
that was not going to
and that'll keep him here. Yeah. It's not that simple.
On Monday, thanks to Clark Rowland for chiming in, we'll be talking about the football schedule that gets released tomorrow on Thursday. Didn't realize that.
Oh, that's right. So, that's what I'll be writing about tomorrow.
There you go. Clark, you're helping us plan things out. Thanks, buddy. All right, that'll wrap things up. 90 minutes of great content today. Will, any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just can we get some good news, please? A win over Notre Dame tonight would be really nice. And for wrestling to beat both Duke and both UNC would be nice.
Yeah, get back in the win column against UNC. So,
yes.
All right, that'll do it for us. Hope you can join us Monday morning, 10 o'clock a.m. for another episode of the Tech Sideline Podcast. That'll do it for us, for our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, behind the scenes. I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes, saying so long. Thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 164 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center, Anytime Fitness, and Campus Emporium. Have a great week, Hokies.